Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Kamma daf mem tet, and we are at the Mishnah at the bottom of mem chet amud bet, and I'm going to share my screen. I just realized it didn't open the document yet. Here we go, and here we go. So, um, um, there we are. So we are starting with a new Mishnah, so let's just jump right into it. Sure, but let's actually just remind ourselves of the fundamental law that is going to be the basis for the discussion that we'll have in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah talks about what happens if a woman loses her baby. She miscarries. She's pregnant, and unfortunately, because of some assault upon her, she is going to miscarry. So we're going to distinguish between what happens if it's an ox that performs that assault, is the owner of the ox responsible, versus a person. The psukim in the Torah talk about two men fighting, and then one of them apparently accidentally hits the woman and causes the miscarriage. So the person who was trying to hit the other guy, but he hit the woman, so he's going to be liable to her husband for the value that's associated with that offspring. So that's what the pasuk says. Again, the pasuk, just to read the pasuk, v'chiyinatsu anashim v'nagfu isha hara. So when two men are fighting, are struggling, and they hit a pregnant woman, v'yatsu yiladeha, and her child comes out, meaning that she has a miscarriage. V'lo yeh ason anosh ye'anesh kasher yashis alav. So he should certainly be punished. Baal ha'isha v'nasan biflilim. That the woman ends up getting paid. The husband ends up getting paid the value of the offspring. So that is the pasuk that is relevant for us here. So let's take a look. So shor shahaya miskabin lechabe ro. An ox was going to try, we'll call, was going to try and gore another ox, vihika esaisha. But instead, just like we had the two men struggling, and instead one was hit the woman, so too here, the two oxen were fighting, and one was trying to hit the other, and it hit the woman. V'yatsu yaladeha, and her child came out. Patur midmei vladot. There's actually no obligation in this case for the payment for the offspring. The Adam Shahaya Miskabin Lechavero. But when you have a person who's trying to hit somebody else, another person, and he hits by accident the woman, so Mishalem Demei Vladot. Then you have to pay the value of the offspring. So that's rule number one. Now, how do we determine the amount of the payment for the children, for the miscarriage? So shaman isha, you evaluate the how much the woman would be worth as a slave. Let's imagine selling her as a slave when she was pregnant before the miscarriage. How much would she be worth? Kamma hi yafa ad shelo yalda. How much was she worth before she had the miscarriage? But kamma hi yafa mishiyalda. And how much is she worth now that she had the miscarriage? So Amar Rabbi Gamliel, there's a debate about that. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, excuse me. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, 1 second, that is not going to be a great method, because there will be times in came isha yoledes mishpachas. So I'm going to understand it the way what I think is the simplest way. There'll be certain times where the woman's value will go up as a result of her not being pregnant any longer, because maybe the pregnancy was a high-risk pregnancy. And so as a result, now that her pregnancy is over, she's not at high risk any longer. And so maybe her value will go up as a result. So Ella Shamanes Avlados Kamahin Yafin. Rather, you need to evaluate the child separately from the mother. Don't just look at how much the mother is worth before and after. Rather, how much is this, if I were to just sell the child within the mother as a slave, how much would that child be worth? given the fact that there's a chance that it won't come to fruition, and of course, or even after it's born, it may not survive. So those issues, would go into the valuation, and that was how you valuate the damages. All right, so we now dealt with when you do the pay you damages and how you calculate the damages, and we had a machlokus on the latter, and now we talk about who gets the damages. V'nosein labal, it's all given to the husband. V'im ein labal, if she doesn't have a husband, namely if her husband has died, nosein liyorshav, so then it goes to the husband's heirs. Haisa shivcha nishvinish tachra, if she herself was a slave who was freed, Ogiores, or she was a convert, Patur. Then she is then the person, because a slave who is freed is considered like a convert, and a convert, of course, themselves, both when they have no offspring are considered to have no heirs, and as a result, that the funds go to whoever claims them first. And so as a result, the claimant here is the person who owes the damages. He's holding the money because he hasn't paid yet. And so as a result, he would end up not having to pay. And Rashi helps us here a little bit. First of all, so Haisa, second line, end of the line in Rashi. Haisa shivcha v'nishtachrara. She was a slave and she was freed. Kolomer, Haisa Meshuchreres Ogiores, Nisua Lager Ola Eved Meshuchrar. That we're talking about a situation where she herself was married also to a convert or to a freed slave, because it's not her status that actually matters. It's the husband's status. It's the one who impregnated her, who is the one who is going to get the payment. His status is the one that matters. The ain la bal shemes, and she doesn't have a husband because he died. So then putter. That's where the person who did damage would be putter. Why would he be putter? The hamachzich b'nichsei hager shemes ve'ein lo yorshin zacha. Because somebody who grabs onto the possessions of a convert who has died with no heirs, that person is successful in making that claim, and therefore owns that property. V'zeh, and this person who is the one who did the damage, kodem l'zakot b'masha biyado. He already is holding the money that he owes the decedent, and so as a result, he doesn't have to pay. Okay, so we'll stop there in Rashi. Rashi then explains why we use the specific language of a maidservant who has been freed, as opposed to a freed as a freed woman. Meaning that why not just say that we're talking about that she had been freed, as opposed to a maidservant who had been freed, as opposed to saying, and noting the fact that that language suggests a recentness, the language that the Gemara uses. So Haisa Shivcham Vinishtach Rara, that she had been freed, as opposed to she had been freed previously. So that's the reason that specifically it's to emphasize that she doesn't have any heirs, and that she and her husband don't have any heirs, because that she was freed so recently. So that's why Rashi explains. That's what Rashi goes on to explain in that Rashi. So let's take a look in the Gemara. So now the Gemara is going to attempt to derive a lesson from the setup for the first rule of the Mishnah. So Taima de miskaben lechavero. Why is it that the ox is not obligated in paying the payment to the woman? It's because the ox was not trying to hit the woman. The ox was trying to hit its fellow ox. So ha miskaben leisha. Maybe we can derive from this that if it had intended to hit the woman, mishalom dmei vladot, then you would have to pay the damages. So lema to have a tiyufta de Rav Ada Barahava. So maybe that should be an undermining of Rav Ada Barahava, because the Amar Rav Ada Barahava shavarim sheniskavnu leisha peturim midmei vladot, that even if a ox intends to hit the woman and causes the miscarriage, it is going to be, the owner of the ox is going to be exempt from the payment for the offspring. So Amar Lach Rav Ada Barahava, Rav Ada Barahava would tell you, Huadin, now same rule applies. That even in our Mishnah, even though our Mishnah specifically talks about a case where the ox is trying to hit another ox, even if it had tried to hit the woman, it would also be putter. Why? So then, why does it talk about an ox trying to get another ox instead of the more extreme case of an ox trying to get the woman directly? I need to kabai lemisna seifa. It's because the end of our Mishnah is telling us the halacha from the Torah. The halacha from the Torah is talking about two men who are fighting each other, where the man is trying to hit the other man and he hits the woman. So Adam Shahaya Miskaven Lechabeiro, Dehachiksiv Kra. That's what the pasuk is talking about. So therefore, Katani Reisha Nami, Shor Shahaya Miskaven Lechabeiro. So it's just the context. That's why we had that specific case. Okay, so now let's talk about an exception to the rule. So Amarav Papa Shor Shanagak as Hashifka V'Yatsu Yeladeha. What about if the animal caused a miscarriage of a slave? So now what's the story? And here's where the donkey is going to come into the discussion. So Mishalem Demei Vladot, there you do need to pay. You do need to pay for the owner of the ox does need to pay for the loss of the offspring, even though the ox was the one that caused it, and even though the ox may not have intended to hit the maid servant. My timer. So chamrusa abarta ba'alma hu da'azik. It's like getting a pregnant donkey. So as a result, because the Amar Kra, Shavulachem po im hachamor, when Abraham tells Eliezer, his slave, to stay with the donkey, the language is im hachamor, that he should stay with the donkey. But it didn't need to tell us that. It didn't need to reference the donkey. Well, the word im, ayin mem, can also be am. Ayin mem also, if you put a different vowel underneath it, could be a nation. It could be a patach underneath it. It can indicate a nation. And so what it's saying is am hadom lechamor, that non-Jews on some level don't have a sense of holiness associated with them, and therefore are like donkeys. And so as a result, if in fact you had a slave, or you could understand this as just being that a slave is like that, is like an animal, and so as a result, that's why if it's a slave that gets injured, the owner of the ox will need to pay for the loss, for the miscarriage as well, and the damages associated with it. Okay. So Ketza Mishalim Dmei Vladot. So we saw in our Mishnah that we asked, how do you value the value of the offspring? And so we said that we figure out how much she's worth before she has the miscarriage and how much she's worth after. So Dmei Vladot. What about Shevach Vlados Mibaile? You are asking a question about the value of the miscarried infant itself. But what about the fact that a pregnant woman looks better? We saw this in connection with the animals, that the animal, when the animal is pregnant, not only is there the value of the child within the animal, but there's also a value associated with the animal being healthier, being fatter, being more robust, and as a result, having a larger skin associated with it. So all those benefits that were associated with pregnancy, how about those benefits? Why aren't we asking about that appreciation? So Hakinama Kamar, no, that's in fact what the Mishnah is telling us. How do we determine the value of the child itself along with the benefit of being pregnant? Shaman as a isha, we calculate the woman's value as a slave. Kamma hi yafa ad shelo yalda, but kamma hi yafa mishiyalda. How much was she worth before she gave birth, and how much is she worth after she had the miscarriage? So that's the calculation. So Amar Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel im kain misha isha yoledis mishbachas. So again, we have this situation where it seems like Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel is saying that she's worth more after she gives birth. So what's that saying? So my Kamar, Rashi told us, if you take a look at the top line in Rashi, that really you can't understand this Mishnah without the Gemara. So what is this? So now the Gemara is going into it. What is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel really saying here? So Amar Rabba explains Haki Kamar. So we're going to have two different explanations of this understanding. Sorry, let me scroll the screen so that we're at the right place. Here we go. So two different understanding of what we're saying. So we're up to number 5 on the screen. So Hakikamer, here's number 1. So the isha mushbachas kodem sheteled yoser mila'achar sheteled. Is a woman worth more before she gave birth than after she gave birth? The answer is maybe not. That in fact, after a woman goes through a childbirth, even if the child is stillborn because of the goring, the woman can actually be worth more after a birth than before, because we now know that the woman is of sturdy stock and is able to survive a pregnancy. And so that will cause her to be worth more, because we know as a slave, she'll be able to carry more children. V'halo isha mishpachas la'achar sheteled yoser mikodem sheteled. A woman is worth more after she gives birth than before she gave birth. Ela shaman es havlados v'noslin labal. So that's why you need to figure out the value of the child separate from the woman, and that's what you end up giving to the husband. And Tanya Nami Hoki, we in fact have a brisa that says this. Is she going to be worth more before she gave birth than after? No. She's worth more after she's given birth than before giving birth. So Ella Shamanis of blood is the nosel nabal. So therefore, we end up giving the husband the value of the child separate. You imagine selling the child within the mother rather than the mother herself, because otherwise you might end up with a negative value. So that's explanation number 1. Rava Amar Hachiktani. Rava says no. This is what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is trying to say. V'chi ha'isha l'mishi yoledes mishpachas mashpachas. Is the woman, is her appreciation really only supposed to go to the husband? She doesn't have any role in her own body's appreciation. That's not true. She also has a higher value. It's not only, as a pregnant woman, it's not only about the child. If you were to sort of break down the valuation of a woman, which is an awful thing to think about, but it's, this is how we calculate damages. If we break down that value, there are effectively 3 components. There's her underlying value. There's the fact that she has an infant inside her. And there's the fact that she has this healthy component to being pregnant, to being a more vital woman. And so as a result, that those 3 elements may each have a positive value. And if they all each have a positive value, well, then should it really be that the third of those components, that value of her being pregnant, that extra value associated with her being pregnant, should that really go to the husband? So Ella Shaman es havlados v'noslin labal. So what do? We figure out the value of the offspring, and that goes to the husband. The shevach vlados cholkin, and the value of the appreciation to her of being pregnant, that we're going to split. Because on one hand, it relates to her, and on the other hand, it relates to the pregnancy, and so we will split that. And Tanya Nami Haki. And you know what? We have a second brisa that seems to be consistent with Rabba's explanation of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because we say, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we have a brisa, does a woman really, her entire increase in value go to the one who caused her to give birth, or the one who is for whom she's giving birth? And she gets nothing from that appreciation? No, that shouldn't be. Figure out the damage on its own, and you figure out the pain on its own. And you figure out the value of the infant, and you give that to the husband. And then the value associated with the additional value of the pregnancy that you're going to divide. So 1 second, Kasha, the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we've got two brisas that are statements of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and they conflict. One focuses on the fact that maybe her value is lower after is higher after pregnancy than before pregnancy, and the one focuses on the fact that there's a separate element of appreciation of being pregnant. So lo kasha kan b'mvakeret v'kan b'she'ena mivakares. When we have the first brisa where we're talking about just the concern about her value going up after being pregnant and having had the miscarriage, that's where this is her first pregnancy. And so as a result, by learning that she is of such good stock that she could survive even this the attack of the ox and losing her infant, so then she will go up in value as a result. And so as a result, but when it's not her first child, and we already know that she's of healthy stock and is able to bear children, so then as a result, then her value, then we will focus not just on the value of being of the infant separately, but we will focus on her appreciated value as well, because now we can the calculation of her slave value will already have incorporated her ability to withstand childbirth. And so that's why, if it's not her first child, will be more Mark, they could really use your help. Okay, so the Rabbanan, the Amri Shevach Vlados Nami Labal. So 1 second, when the rabbis say that that the appreciation also goes to the husband, so that everything goes to the husband, my timer, why is it that when the husband according to the rabbis, the husband not only gets the value of the child, but he gets the full value of her increased value of her pregnancy? Again, we're dividing her value into three components. There's her underlying value. There's the value of her being pregnant, because she has a greater vitality to her and healthiness associated with that. And then there's the value of the child itself. So why is, according to the rabbis, does she not get a part, the way Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, of the value associated with her being pregnant, with her appreciation for pregnancy? So, so although it says Kiditznan in the Gemara, the Masoros Hashas changes it Kidiktanya, because it's actually from a brisa. So Mimashma Shenemar V'Yatzu Yiladeha, from the fact that the Torah tells us that she lost her child, that she miscarried, of course I'm going to know that she's pregnant. So my Talmud Lomer Hara, why does the pasuk actually affirmatively tell us that she was also pregnant? Lomar lecha shevach harayon lebal, to tell us that even the value associated with the pregnancy goes to the husband. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. What about Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? Hi hara my darishba. What does he do with the word pregnancy? Because after all, we just said that the Torah didn't need to tell us that. So look at the Tanya. We've got another brisa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, La'olam ein chayev ad sheyakena keneged beis harayon. That the only time that we're going to say the miscarriage there's a liability for the miscarriage is when she's hit opposite her womb. Why? So, and Rav Papa, and Rav Papa qualifies that. Lo tema keneged beis harayon mamish. It doesn't mean literally opposite her womb. It doesn't mean like you just focus on that little area of the torso. Anywhere where the the blow is going to have a ramification, a direct ramification on the child. So the point is the entire torso of the woman would be covered, but if she gets hit in her hand or her foot, well, that's not going to, that's one of, that's not as likely to cause a miscarriage, and therefore she's not going, the person who does that hitting is not going to be liable if you hit her in those other places. And that's why it says hara. That's why it says that she's pregnant, in order to teach the location of where the person would have to hit in order to cause a problem. Okay, so we've now explained that the source of this debate as to who gets paid, and now we're going into the details. Haisa shifcha v'nishtachrara o gioris patur. What about that situation where the woman herself, but really we're talking about her husband, is a convert or a freed slave and has died? So there, the damager is going to be exempt. So Amarabba lo shanu ela shechaval ba b'chaye hager umeit hager. The situation is where we're talking about where she was hit when her husband, the convert, was still alive, and therefore she was hit when the convert was alive. So the convert was due this money. Now the convert passes away, so as a result, the money is free for whomever takes it. Since it hasn't been paid, it's in the hands of the original damager, and so the damager gets to keep it. That's the situation. That since he hit her during the lifetime, Zacha Bahuger, that convert was the one who took ownership of the funds, even though he hasn't been paid yet. The Kaven de Mesa Ger, and since he died, Zacha Bahu Min Ager, it's acquired back from the convert by the damager. But what happens if the husband has died already? Unfortunately, the husband died even before the pregnancy that he had caused has come to fruition. That before she gave birth, so he died during the 9 months of pregnancy, and now the woman gets struck and is caused to miscarry. Well, there, Zachya la ihi begavaihu. So she has acquired the offspring because now there's no husband involved, and so umechayav l'shalumi la l'dida. So she gets paid the damages. That's what Rabbah teaches. Rav Chisda disagrees. Rav Chisda says, no, that is not who gets paid the damages. That is not the way it works. Sorry, let me just put this out. That is not the way it works. Rather, Rav Chisda says, Mari Dichi, this is what you're teaching. Atu Vlados Sarare Ninhu are children just like bundles. The Zachya Bahu, that she should be able to acquire them when her husband dies. That's not, the children are not property like that. Ella Isei Leval Zachale Rachmana Leise Leval Lo. It's all dependent on the husband being there. It's essentially a xeris akasuv, that if there's a husband, the husband will get paid for the miscarriage. And if there's no husband, so then there's no liability associated with the miscarriage. So, or at least no liability associated with the miscarriage, assuming the husband has no heirs, because the person will claim it back. So Meisvei, 1 second. So now we're going to challenge Rabbah's view. Again, Rabbah says that if the husband has already died when she is hurt, the woman gets the money herself. Whereas Rav Chisda says, no, it always goes to the husband or his heirs, and it doesn't go to the woman. And so as a result, any damage will only just go to the heirs. So Meisvei, Hika es ha'isha v'yatzu li'aladeha no se nezek v'tzar le'isha. We had this brisa that we quoted previously, basically 5 rules that are associated with it, although I'll break it into 4. If the person strikes the woman, so and she has a miscarriage, so then she gets the pain and she gets the loss associated with her own value. Udmei vlados labal. And the value of the offspring go to the husband. Ein habal, if there's no husband, no sin liyorshav. It goes to the husband's heirs. Ein ha'isha, no sin liyorshav. And if there's a woman's not alive, her damage goes to her heirs. And what about if she was a slave who had been freed? And now we're understanding this as being referring to, and the husband of the woman is also a slave, Ogioris, or she was a convert and her husband was a convert. Zacha, the damager, gets the rights if in fact the husband has died without any heirs. So we see that when one kills the offspring after the convert's death, he's exempt from paying them because again, the zacha, the damager has acquired the rights. That contradicts Rabbah. So two answers to this contradiction. So answer number one is Amre umiya diva mimasnisin. You can interpret this case just as we interpreted our Mishnah. That we said that our Mishnah is talking about where the woman was damaged and hit when her husband, the convert, was still alive, and then the convert died. So hachinami we can say the same thing is true here in the final case of the brisa that we just cited of Haisa Shivcha Minishtakrara Ogioris Zacha, that the damager gets to keep it, because we're talking about a case where the husband was alive when she was hit, and then he dies, and so in that situation, that's where Zacha the damager. The Ibayasema. Or alternatively, you could say, no, even if if the woman was struck after the husband died, La'akar Misas Hager, and now we turn to Memtedim a bet, Utne Zachta, and don't say that when we say Zacha, don't say that it refers to the damager, but rather say that it refers to her. And Tosos helps us out here and says, listen, what we're saying is the following. Take a look at the top Tosos Memtedim Bet. V'ein megia habraisa. We're not changing the language of the brisa. Ela kolomar zacha misha yesh lo zchus. When we say zacha, we're saying the one who is entitled to it. So in the case where the husband died after she was hit, well, then that would go to the damager, because the damager is holding the money and it belongs to the deceased convert. The deceased convert has no heirs, so the damager can make the claim. But if the husband had died before she was hit, so therefore it goes to her, well, then when we say zacha, we mean that she gets it. And the reason that we use, again, and so when we say zacha, we just mean whoever's supposed to get the money gets it. And so that's how Tosos explains it. So the bottom line is that we now have, we still have this debate between Rabbah and Rav Chisda, and we don't have a definitive proof to support Rav Chisda. But can we now say that this debate between Rabbah and Rav Chisda is actually a Tanaic debate? Lema katanai, as we pick up the third word on Memtedim Abet, should we say that this debate is actually a debate among Tanaim because of the following brisa? Bas Yisrael shenisis leger v'nis Abram imenu. If a Jewish woman marries a convert and becomes pregnant, v'chavol ba b'chayei hager, and she gets hit while the ger is alive, no sein demei v'ladot leger, then the value of the offspring goes to the convert. La'achar misas hager, after the death of the convert, Tanei chada chayiv, Tanei chada patur. We have two brises with the exact same language, and they have the opposite conclusion. One says that the person who did the damage is liable, and one person says that the person who did the damage is not liable, is exempt. So my lab Tanai Ninu. We can say that this is a machlokas Tanaim. This is that what they're arguing about is specifically the debate between Rabbah and Rav Chisda. That according to Rabbah, you're liable because it goes to the woman, and according to Rav Chisda, you're putter because it doesn't go to the woman. So li Rabbah vade Tanaihi. When it comes to Rabbah, it's got to be a machlokas Tanaim. And as Rashi tells us that why does it have to be a machlokas Tanaim? excuse me, top Rashi on Memterim bed. Al Karchach Muki Lamilsa Kitanai. We have to say that there's a Machlokas Tanaim according to Rabbah, because Dehu Amar Chaya, because he's the one who says that there's liability to the woman. V'hadid Tani Pator, and if you were to say that the damager is exempt, Lo matzi muki like kavase. There's no way to set up that brisa like Rabbah. And therefore, he would have to say that I just hold like the Tana that says Chayiv. But El Rav Chisda Milema Tanaihi, do we also have to say that Rav Chisda says that it's a Machlokas Tanaim? Lo. No, you don't have to say this. And lo kasha, it's not actually difficult to say that we can explain this according to Rav Chisda's view. Because Harabanan, when we say in the Brisa that you're exempt, that's the rabbis. Because again, the Tana Kamma in our Mishnah says that there's no liability for the appreciation associated with pregnancy. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that there is liability to the woman associated with pregnancy, namely her valuation. Remember, there were three parts to her valuation: her underlying value, we're not talking about that, the value of the child, and the value of her being pregnant, and that according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the value of her being pregnant is split between her and her husband, and so there is a payment and so Rabbi Chisda can say that the rabbis are saying that there's no payment whatsoever, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying that there would be a payment because she's entitled to half of the value associated with her being pregnant. So in second, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, my area la'achar misa afilu mechayim nami isla plelka. Well, why have this brisa if talk about after the death of the husband? Even when the husband is alive, she gets that payment. Mechayim isle palga lachar misa kule. Well, the point is that when it comes to the value of her being pregnant, her interest in that value will go up. When the husband is still alive, she's going to split it with her husband. But when the husband is no longer alive, so then she will get the whole thing. Especially if the husband is a convert. So that way there's no valuation that would go to him. Or we could say, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Really, we're all talking about Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And kan b'shebach vlados, the kan b'dmei vlados, and that the two brises are talking about the different components. If you're talking about the value of the offspring itself, that would be exempt according to Rav Chisda. But if you're talking about the value of being pregnant, that would be the piece that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would say you're liable. So Amrei. So, 1 second, Mishevach Vlados, Lishma Dmei Vlados. Why don't we say that since the woman gets everything according to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel when the husband has died with respect to the benefit of being pregnant, maybe we should say that the same thing happens to the value of the offspring, that if the husband dies, she gets everything. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Lishma l'Rabbanan. And we should derive what the rabbis say from Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, meaning why don't we say that everybody agrees that when the husband dies, everything goes to the woman? So Amrei lo, no, there's a big difference. Shevach vlados d'chaychi yada begavayhu sachya behu bechulu. That when it comes to the value of being pregnant, where the woman already has some aspect of interest in it, so then if the husband dies, she'll acquire the full rights. But Dmei Vlado, when it comes to the value of the offspring, the lo shaycha yada begavayu, where the woman doesn't have any rights to it, lo zachya behu klal, so she won't have any rights to it at all. And the rabbis will say that since she doesn't have any rights even to the value of her appreciation for pregnancy, she won't have any rights to that after he dies also. So as a result, we've now concluded that there is no basis to support either approach. We've come up with the fact that it actually, according to Rabbah, is a machlokas tanayim, and according to Rav Chisda could say that everybody agrees with him. So, okay, so now we're going to ask a question. So, boy mine Rav Yeva Sava and Rav Nach. So Rav Yeva Sava asked the question. I'm sorry, let me scroll a little bit. I didn't realize I had gone further than this. Okay. So Rav Yeva Saba asked the following question. So Hamaxik Rav Nachman, and he asked Rav Nachman, Ma Hamaxik Bishtaro Sav Shalger. Once we've now talked about claiming something from a convert, what's the story with documents? Let's say you have a document that shows that you own a particular piece of property. So and now and you're a convert, and now the person comes and that person has died, and let's say the person, the convert, has unfortunately passed away, and now the somebody comes and takes that contract that says that the convert owned a piece of property. So man demachsik bishtara adaite de arahu demachsik, is the person trying to claim the property through that grabbing of the contract? Uba'ara halo achsik. And when you try and grab property you through a contract, that is not actually the grabbing of property. And therefore, ushtara nami lokana, and we'll say, therefore, he does not even acquire the contract. Delav daite ashtara, because his intent is focused on the underlying content of the contract and not the document itself. Odilma daitanami ashtara, or do we say that no, he was picking up the contract for whatever purpose it is, and it's even if it's just a piece of paper, it's worth something. So Amar Le, Rav Nachman responded, Eini Mori, tell me something. Answer me this. Does the person need a piece of paper to cover his flask? So Amar Le, Lutzor, Lava Lutzor. Yes, he wants to use it to wrap a possibility. So if in fact, so the implication of this back and forth is that if the person could actually have some use for the piece of paper, well then when you pick up the piece of paper, even if your intention may have been for the underlying contract, you actually can claim the piece of paper, but you don't actually get the benefit of the underlying contract itself. Okay, so that was that discussion. So again, the implication is that since he wants the paper as paper, that is a basis to acquire the document. So now another case of a property of a convert who dies without heirs. So Rab Amar Rabba Mashkono Shal Yisrael Biyad Ger. What happens if somebody owes money to a convert and has given that convert a security? So let's say, I often will say, my computer I've given to John the convert, and John the convert now is holding my computer as a guarantee to payment. Umeis hager, and the convert now dies. John has passed away. Uva Yisrael acher vehexiko, and now Stan here goes into John's property and says, "Oh, this looks like a great computer. John's died with no heirs. I'm going to take the computer." So he grabs it. Motzian osel miyado. We say to Stan, sorry, tough luck. It goes back to, we take it out of his hand and it goes to me. Why? My timer. What's the reason? Kevin de Mesle Ger Pakale Shibude. That since John the convert has passed away, we're going to, the lien associated with this computer has disappeared as well. And so Mashkono shall ger biyad Yisrael. And so as a result, I'm sorry. So therefore, essentially, this now has gone back to my possession already. The whole security interest that he held in it has gone away. And so who's the owner of this computer? Me. I'm the owner of the computer. And so as a result, even when Stan tries to take it, it's tough luck to Stan. Now, what about the opposite situation? John has now lent, I have lent John money. Mashkono shall ger biyad Yisrael. Yes. And so now I've lent John money, and John has given me this computer as as collateral. Umeis hager, and again John passes away. Uva Yisrael v'hechsikbo, and now Stan grabs the computer. So now what happens? So zeh kana keneged ma'usav, v'zeh kana es ashar. So actually, Stan has successfully done something because Stan grabbed the computer, and I only have an interest in the computer. of the value of my loan to John. So if this computer is worth $1,500 and my loan to John was $1,000, so now I get $1,000 of the value. But what's left, Stan has still collected, and Stan would own the remaining $500 of this computer. So why do we say that? Why don't we say the following? If this computer was in my possession, why doesn't my courtyard acquire the computer for me? Your courtyard can acquire something for you even when you don't have any knowledge of the situation. And so even though the John has died and I didn't even know it until after Stan grabbed the computer, because the computer was in my courtyard, let me acquire the full value of the computer, including the extra $500, and I should win. So no, Amre, they answered Hacha b'mayaskin, and here's the case. Now we're going to set up a case, but in the end we're going to reject the underlying ruling of the case. But let's go through it in any event. Delay say, no, we're talking about where I'm not around. Kol hecha de'isali day, because when de'i by mikne matzikane, so kanyale nami chatzero, that when I am present and have the ability to pick up the computer and thereby make an acquisition, that's when my courtyard has the ability to make an acquisition. But kol hecha delesa day. But if I'm not around, and I don't have the boy hula mikne lo matzikani, I don't have the ability. I'm over in Manhattan. I don't have the ability to pick up this computer now and take possession. I'm in another city, and so as a result, therefore chatzeru nami lo kanya. My courtyard also will not acquire. Maybe we could say that this shows that this is the halacha, that that's in fact the case. But no, v'hilchasa delese b'chatzero delo kana. No, that we're going to change the facts, and the situation is that this computer that was my collateral that I get that John the convert has given me is not in fact in my possession. John maybe was still holding it. He's dedicated this computer for my collateral, but it was not actually in my possession. And that's why my courtyard couldn't acquire it. But in an ordinary case, if this computer had been in my possession and John had passed away, and then Stan came and took it, it would be tough luck on Stan because my field would have already acquired the entire computer. And so I would get the $1,000 associated with the loan that I made to John, and I would get the $500 of extra value that I get because I've made a claim on property of a convert who has passed away without any heirs. So that brings us to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah returns us to the issue of liability for damage by a boar. But for that discussion, stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. So I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day, and enjoy learning together. And God willing, again, we'll pick up with the Mishnah on Mem Tet Amabet, God willing, tomorrow. Have a
Dr. Koh, that dispute between Rabba and Rav Chisda
yes,
that they conclude was a dispute between Tanaim. Usually, when the Gemara says, "Is this a dispute between Tanaim?" they just prove the idea that it's a dispute between Tanaim.
correct. But here Rabba is stuck. There's no way Rabba can work with the view that says putter, and so as a result, basically it would be a dispute among Tanaim according to him, and it's only Rav Chisda who they're able to answer.
And yet, apparently, at least according to Steinsaltz, we passed according to Rabba.
Really, very interesting. Well, that would make sense because a lot of the discussion is in the detail of Rabbah. So often, when you have the detailed discussion of it, that is how we paskin. So, and there is something nicer about the fact that the woman should get you know, that it shouldn't it shouldn't disappear, that somebody shouldn't be exempt just because the husband has passed away. So there's something very nice that I like. Certainly, Rabba is the more attractive viewpoint from my perspective.
All right,
All
thank
right.
you.
Have a great day, everybody. Be well.
You too.
See you tomorrow.